Welcome back to the Sportsmemo College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, where we're going game numbers 333 to 362 with today's first guest, second guest overall for the segment, Teddy Covers. Teddy, welcome to the pod.
Hey, great to be here, Drew.
Great to have you, man. How's your week going?
You sound really perky today, dude.
It's Thursday, College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, man. It's a good one.
Exactly. You gotta be sure to be caffeinated before you try to host this one, because there's not a lot of folks that go through every game on the board every week. I give you credit for sitting through all of us talking for all this time. That being said, I know the listeners love the Thursday show. It is loaded with good information, and it's been a pretty good football season for a lot of guys at sportsmemo.com, myself included. It's been a real good week. The NBA's clicking right now. The NFL's been real good all year, and I'm still well over 500, 56% for the season in college football. I want to be higher. I expect to be higher, but when you're hitting 71% in the NFL and 71% in the NBA, I'll take 56% in college. I can't look at that poorly.
Hey, 56% will take it, and you're actually 43, 26, and 1 in all football year to date. That's 62%, 64% on the big tickets. The higher rated releases Teddy is giving out to the clients. And guys, coupon code TEDDY100, no spaces, all capital letters, TEDDY 100, coupon code for $100 off of his 30-day all access. Teddy, let's get into the games here. We got a noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific kick, Nebraska at Ohio State. Looks like 73 the total, 17.5 right now at Chris. Ohio State laying at home.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'm not, in general, you think about the concept. Here's Ohio State off a bad, ugly blowout loss at Purdue. They've had a week off. Now they're at home against a team that probably can't physically stand up to them in the trenches. And boy, it's that from that perspective alone, it does feel like an Ohio State Buckeyes type of spot. But and we've certainly seen Ohio State dominate this series in recent years. Was it 56-14 at Nebraska last year, 62-3 at home, in a similar point spread range 2 years ago. No decisions, no sweat if you had Ohio State in either of those contests. But, and it's a big but, I'm not sold on this Buckeyes team right now. I didn't like what I was reading in the local papers this week. There's a lot of buzz about Urban Meyer's job security and if he'll be back next year. JT Barrett, look, the guy's been sick. He's thrown, 30 touchdown passes so far this season. I mean, truly ridiculous numbers so far. As I say, JT Barrett. Dwayne Haskins has thrown for 30 touchdown passes, almost 9 yards per attempt, and only 5 picks this season. But Nebraska's a 2-win team. You know what I mean? One would think, Ohio State, they've throttled this squad, but it's back-to-back wins for Nebraska. They certainly, they had the one rough game against Michigan. Other than that, they've been in every game this season, and Martinez is scary. And so even though it's a Buckeye spot, I'm not going to get to the window with Ohio State here. It'd be underdog or pass, and that means pass. I'm not really going to get involved in this one.
Yeah, interesting take there, Teddy. I mean, you bring up the Urban Meyer situation and kind of alluding to it holding the team back a little bit. Do you really think it matters that much? I mean, all the coordinators are the same. He's not like calling plays or anything. You put that much emphasis into it, huh?
I think when you have turmoil surrounding a program in any way, and especially at the top of a program, it doesn't matter if the head coach is fighting with the assistant, if the AD is fighting with the head coach. Some of this stuff doesn't trickle down. And Urban Meyer's complaining about headaches. I do worry about the state of whether Ohio State is, because think about Meyer's track record off a bye, and Meyer with extra time to prepare, and Meyer long-term ATS stats. I'm not so sure all of those come into play for this Ohio State team right now.
Good take there, Teddy. Let's move to the ACC here. We got Georgia Tech at North Carolina. Looks like the Yellow Jackets laying 6 on the highway, 64 the total, Teddy.
Yeah, money's been coming on Georgia Tech. It looks like Taquan Marshall is going to be able to go this week. He did not go last week. Tobias Oliver made his first career start for the Yellow Jackets, and he didn't have to throw a pass. 465 yards on the ground for Georgia Tech in that ball game. That's what they're capable of doing, and they're going against a Tar Heels defense that, when you think about the strengths of North Carolina, you're not thinking, oh, this team's going to be really good at defending the triple option. It's a dicey defensive squad. They're a 1-7 team. They've hung tough. They really have. Each of their last 3 losses coming by 10 or less. The bad loss at Miami. I guess they had the bad loss against East Carolina. That was probably the worst of the bunch. But they've been competitive in defeat. The offense, more than 500 yards in 2 of the last 3 losses. They've been able to move the football somewhat. And if North Carolina, with the total sitting here at 64, I don't trust North Carolina to stop Georgia Tech. So if I'm looking at the Tar Heels, I'm going to probably put that together with the over. I think North Carolina is not going to cover this number unless they get in the 30s. I expect Georgia Tech to get theirs.
Yeah, I was surprised to see the money coming in on Georgia Tech, but you bring up the good point with their last game at Virginia Tech. That offense was humming, man. To see what they did there at Lane Stadium, it's a tough train to get in front of.
Yeah, and the money's coming in purely on the quarterback situation. Don't underestimate how the college football markets work in weird ways, in the sense of there's a lot of guys making big bets who don't watch college football. All they're trying to do is get in front of the information. And, here's the quarterbacks in. Boom, the bet's coming on Georgia Tech. And then that's not unusual to see that type of a move happen fairly quickly off a QB announcement, like the one Georgia Tech announced. When was it that they announced that Marshall was going to play? Or probable. He was announced as probable. I think it was yesterday.
Teddy, let me ask you a question while you look that up. As far as you say, like, big bets coming in from guys or groups that don't necessarily dig deep into college football as far as watching it. And I've noticed, just like any sport, college football has a lot of moves, not a lot, but moves that are wrong. Would you say that the moves are wrong at a higher percentage of time in college football than, say, other sports?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't stand out that way to me. And again, you have to talk about different times of the season. All right. Early in the season, the bettors are ahead of the books. I'm not fading the big moves in college football. Week 1, week 2, week 1 I might. Week 2, week 3, week 4, bettors tend to have an edge. Just like in the NBA, you see these NBA totals; they're right every day. The moves are right every day. That doesn't go on forever. And what happens as the season progresses in college football, you get statistical databases. Many of the syndicate groups are very comfortable betting their numbers, and again, they're going to make 50 bets on the board. And if they go 28 and 22, they're happy. They had a great day. It's not about winning every game. It's about getting good numbers and betting information before everyone else does. That is what drives the college football betting markets. And for the capper who's trying to pick and choose, find your spots, find your games, and not trying to bet the whole board, someone who watches college football, there are legitimate edges to be had. Doesn't work every week, but there are legitimate edges to be had betting this college football board. And the announcement was on, what's today, Thursday? It was on Tuesday for Marshall to be upgraded to probable. That's when the money came on Georgia Tech.
Good stuff, Mr. Covers. And guys, obviously he knows his stuff. Remember the coupon code Teddy100 at checkout for $100 off his 30-day all-access service. We got 337-338 Missouri at Florida. Looks like 58 the total. The Gators laying 6 in the Swamp, Teddy.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, the all-access pass, that does include all the hoops and all the football. NBA's off to a great start as well, putting my time in. Unfortunately, sleeping not so much in the month of November. Missouri and Florida. This number seemed cheap at the open. Everyone I've talked to says this is cheap, and yet the sharper shops are saying, you know what, let's look at the Mizzou side in this contest with Florida. Both teams are coming off, what do you want to call them, crushing losses? I don't know. I don't know that Florida's was crushing. They went to Georgia. They had a lead. The Gators were not the better of the two teams. Now they return home. Missouri, that was kind of a soul-crushing loss. The way that game went down against Kentucky, where the offense, and this is a Missouri offense. We love Missouri's offense, right? They had 0 first downs in the second half at home last week. 0. They still almost won the game. It wasn't for a punt return touchdown, but they lost. in the last minute, after a pass interference call. But really the type of loss that is supposed to stick with a team like the Tigers. And, from a defensive standpoint, here's a Missouri offense that didn't work last week. Here's a Gators defense that has been capable of controlling games this season. The line does feel short. But at the same time, somebody knows something here because the line hasn't moved up. And like I said, some of the sharper shops are leaning in the other direction. And that concerns me on the Florida side here. It really does. I lean Gators, but there's the one that it's like everyone's leaning Gators. And I think it's going to stay in the lean category. Or not expected to get to the betting window. With Florida against a team, Franks has been better than expected, but Drew Lock is a better QB here, and that concerns me when you're talking about a team catching nearly a touchdown.
Yeah, I agree with you. Drew Lock's the better quarterback, but Teddy, against the better defenses, he really hasn't performed that well. And this under a touchdown, man. I mean, what you were first saying, this is short, man. I love the Gators here, but I'm with you. It's something scaring me about this. Why isn't this number 9.5 or 10?
Don't be surprised. Again, I don't know why it's not 9.5 or 10. My power ranking number was higher. I'll just put it that way. Missouri getting some love, and maybe there is a letdown here for Florida. Or maybe Florida, in some ways, you look at Florida and say, look, the markets have been right on this team all year. From the loss to Kentucky, the Gators have been essentially an undervalued commodity ever since. And this point spread might well be showing it.
Good stuff, Teddy. We got 339-340 in the ACC. Go from Gainesville down to Miami. 51 the total with Duke traveling down to Miami Gardens here to take on the Hurricanes. 9.5 the Canes laying at home. How do you look to bet this one, Teddy?
Well, let's see. Duke gave up 448 yards on the ground against Pitt last week. Oops. And let a big lead get away in that ball game. And, that's something of a concern for me because when you look at Miami, what does Miami want to do? All right. They do not want to force, whether it's Perry or Rozier, and it's supposed to be Rozier again this week. They do not want their quarterbacks to have to chuck downfield. Miami's going to win games when they are able to control the line of scrimmage, pound the rock, and rely on their quarterbacks for play action and the occasional downfield throw. But it's all based on running. And Duke obviously has been very, very vulnerable to the run in recent weeks. 3 losses in the last 4 games for the Blue Devils, all of them by more than a touchdown, and all of them as favorites. But, we bet against Miami last week at Boston College. I didn't think the Canes would be able to weather the BC rushing attack, and they couldn't in that ballgame. But it was more about the offense. The offense could not get going against that Eagles front. They may have more success here against a Duke team that, boy, they've enjoyed pretty dominant performances against in recent years. Last year, Miami beat them 31-6. The year before, Miami beat them 41-20, and it's 4 consecutive point spread covers, wins and covers for the Hurricanes, even though in one of those games they were underdogs, 10-point dogs, in fact, at Duke back in 2015. But it's been a fairly one-sided series, and it is, in theory, a bounce-back spot for the Hurricanes with a little bit of extra time to prepare against a Duke defense that does not handle the run particularly well.
Teddy, we got another ACC contest here with FSU traveling to take on North Carolina State. Looks like 53 the total, with NC State laying 9 at home.
I can only take the dog. I can flat out only take the dog. Look, last week was last week. All right, Florida State quit. Everyone knows it. Taggart knew it. The markets knew it. 59-10, no-show ball game. Taggart called everyone out after the game. Now, this is Willie Taggart, all right, who we say, Willie Taggart, yeah. Willie Taggart, okay, on the road in his coaching career. Okay, just as a visit, this is the criteria for Willie Taggart for this point spread record. Away from home. That's it. Favorite, underdog, doesn't matter. And this is a Taggart, very successful head coach at Western Kentucky. Very successful head coach at South Florida. Nothing at Oregon. He was only there for a year, and now here at Florida State, he's only been here this season. But in those previous stops and this season, 31, 16 against the spread just on the road. That's all. That's the only, a significant sample size, and a head coach who has absolutely gotten his team to step up in hostile environments. Not once, not twice, over and over again. They were embarrassed last week. The offensive line is dismal. DeAndre Francois has been, everyone knows that the markets aren't sleeping on what's happened to Florida State this season. But it's not like things are going great for NC State right now either. They got blasted by Clemson last week. Ryan Finley throwing the ball all over the place, and they still give up 51 points in the loss to Syracuse. Isn't it a defense I can lay a touchdown with? Florida State's got the better defense here by a wide margin, and in theory, it's supposed to be a Seminole spot. We learned a lot about Florida State this week. All right, we learned a lot. We learned everything about Florida State. I think they step up, and I wouldn't be surprised if they hang tough against the Wolfpack. And I'm a little bit surprised at how much money's come on the NC State side of the equation. Although, there are concerns about how healthy Francois is actually going to be for this ball game.
Yeah, it's moving up over the key number of 7, 6.5 to 8, even 9 at some shops. So a lot of money coming in on the Wolfpack. We got 3-4-3, 3-4-4 here. Memphis versus East Carolina. Looks like Memphis 13 on the highway, 64.5 the total. This is another number that looks kind of short here, Teddy. I mean, East Carolina, got beat down by UCF with a backup quarterback, even though they were at home. Now Memphis coming in. I could see kind of same profile type of offense from Memphis. This one could get ugly. What do you think?
East Carolina under Scotty Montgomery. Scotty Montgomery came into the season with a 5-17 point spread record in his 2 years in Greenville.
That's not
so
good.
Far this year. So far this year, East Carolina's 2-5 against the spread. All right. So we are talking at 7-22 ATS. I believe it's the single worst point spread record of any head coach in college football right now, Montgomery. And they pulled the upset. They pulled the upset over North Carolina. They hung tough against South Florida. That's it. The last 3 games, Temple, they lose by 43. Houston, they lose by 22. UCF, they lose by 27. Defense unable to get stops in any of those ball games. Offense unable to move the football in any of those ball games. Now, Memphis's defense is nothing like Temple's or Houston's or UCF. It is a big step down in class defensively. And East Carolina has faced, you look at the defenses they faced this year, they faced the tougher slate of these two teams by a fairly wide margin. Like I said, Memphis, we trust that offense to score. East Carolina, not so much, but I don't think it's short. Memphis, a team you're excited about laying 12.5, 13 on the road with? Not me, and not against an offense. It's one thing if the opposing team can't score. East Carolina's taking a step down in defensive class here, which makes me very reluctant to lay this type of a price with a Tigers team that, again, they should have Darrell Henderson this week, and that's part of the reason why the money's come on Memphis. Darrell Henderson early in the season was the nation's leading rusher, although I don't check those stats every week. I don't know if he still is or not, but he is running backs don't make a big difference ATS. This is one running back that does.
Teddy, heading back to the ACC here. We got number 24 ranked Boston College heading into Lane Stadium to take on Virginia Tech. They're laying 2.5 on the road. That's Boston College, 57.5 the total. Teddy, if I hear one more person say Bud Foster defense, it's just, what does that mean? They're not good on defense. I don't get it. How do you look to bet Boston College, Tech?
So sometimes a team really pisses you off. I was looking at Virginia Tech as soon as they made this switch to Ryan Willis at quarterback. I said, this is a fade team. They're not that good. And they went to Duke and won that game by they blew them out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got a bad read. And no, I had the right read, but I didn't follow it up, and I didn't bet against Virginia Tech the next week. That's the only game they've covered since week 2 of the season. And that was against William and Mary, and then the game against Florida State in the opener. But excuse me, it is not a Virginia Tech team. Again, 49 against Georgia Tech last week, gashed on the ground. 45 allowed against Notre Dame, gashed through the air in that contest. Yeah, it's Bud Foster's defense. They're just not that good this year. And here's BC, man. They just keep clicking. Again, I said the clients and I cashed them as dogs last week. They got the job done defensively in that ball game. I'll just put it this way. BC deserves to be the favorite here. The market's not sleeping on the Eagles, but, A.J. Dillon's, again, running backs are interchangeable, but sometimes they're not. And even though BC's got multiple guys averaging better than 5 yards per carry, A.J. Dillon likely to be a problem for the Virginia Tech Hokies defense.
Yeah, he's a next-level guy, and I agree with you. I think Boston College is the side here. Teddy, moving down, we got an interesting handicap, to say the least, in the Big Ten. Michigan State at the Maryland Terrapins. You know what that means? Maryland's involved. DJ Durkin, if you've been watching any sort of Fox Sports or ESPN, you've heard what's gone on there. But either way, Michigan State is 2.5 or 3 on the road, so a good one to shop around. Make sure you're getting the right number on a key number here. 46.5 the total. Teddy, your thoughts on Maryland and your thoughts on betting this game?
Well, I'll just put it this way. I've got a play up for sale on this game right now. So you can get all my information on Maryland/Michigan State right now at sportsmemo.com. I will say this. The Terps as a team this week are better off having fired Durkin yesterday, than they would have been had he had gone out and coached this past week. This week, I think that there would have been worse problems for Maryland. And note that the fact, again, this line's sticking at 2.5. We're not seeing 3s out there on the Spartans. When every time it hits 3, there's a group out there that's saying nah. Interesting to see if Maryland comes with passion and power this week against a Sparty squad that, their injury list a mile long, or if Maryland's inability to throw the football hurts them so badly against a Michigan State defense that just does not give up anything on the ground. You can get the pick right now, sportsmemo.com.
Teddy, let me ask you one question about the Maryland situation. So he comes back, gets reinstated as the coach, has a team meeting, and a couple guys stand up and walk out. Is that the situation that happened?
There were so many different situations. I mean, the team was divided as to whether they wanted him back or didn't want him back.
And that's what my question is. If a couple guys stand up and walk out, hell, those could be the guys that, another guy came in and took his job. So, of course, they don't want that head coach back in. I have a tough time just gauging it off of a couple guys walking out of a meeting. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. And look, there's no question that Maryland has played for Matt Canada this year. Matt Canada will be their coach on Saturday.
Simple as that, huh?
I mean, look, there was a big question of effort for Durkin and a big question of a split team. The locker room still might be split, but effort-wise, they've shown for Canada pretty much in every game. I mean, there had one really flat spot, but Canada has earned their level of respect.
And from a matchup standpoint, if Maryland can run the ball, we've seen it. Again, we saw it last week against Illinois. We saw it against Texas. They're a great offense, man. They're a tough train to stop in front of if you can't stop their running game. But we'll leave it at that and check out sportsmemo.com for Teddy's play with analysis up and available there. We got 349-350 Oklahoma at Texas Tech. Teddy, we got the Sooners laying 13 on the road, 13.5 at some shops, 77.5 the total. It's going to be a lot of points, but that's a high number, Teddy. How do you look to bet it?
Yeah, I bet against Kyler Murray once this season. I don't know if I'm going to do it again. And I cashed the ticket with Texas. I don't know that I'm in any rush to do it again. This kid, you talk about the special quarterbacks. This kid's special already. That Oklahoma offense is just it's too much for Texas Tech, flat out. Murray for the season. How about this? 12.7 yards per pass attempt, 28 touchdowns, 3 INTs. They run the football effectively. Each of their top 3 pass catchers averages 18 yards of reception or more. That's scary stuff for a Texas Tech defense. Yeah, they're better now than they were a couple years ago. It's still anything but an elite defense. But, of course, in this point spread range, you got to get stops too. And that's, the Red Raiders have been a good dog. They've been hanging tough in these type of contests. But, I mean, they probably – I would think they have to get at least 5 touchdowns to cover this point spread. The home team – it's a home team series, 5-0 against the spread the last 5. And Texas Tech's been pretty good as home dogs, of more than a touchdown or so in the Kingsbury era. But I'm telling you, Murray's a different animal right now. And, if you're asking me who's the best player in college football this year, he would probably get my vote. Yeah, but is he going to win the Heisman? Of course not. Why? Because the Heisman's a popularity contest based on media who don't actually watch college football.
He's better than Gardner Minshew?
Yes.
All right, good stuff, Teddy. We got.
I had to think about it, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, as far as talent-wise, I would agree with you. System, Gardner Minshew's throwing it around out there. I'm surprised he's
been great. Yeah. Wazoo's the only team that hasn't lost a game against the spread all year.
He's got a mustache too, so got to remember that. Anyway, we got
Uncle Rico.
Exactly, he does look like him a little bit, Teddy. 351, 352. The best game outside of the Southeastern Conference, in my opinion. West Virginia at Texas. 58 the total. Looks like Texas laying 2 at home, Teddy.
Yeah, boy, I've got mixed feelings on this. When we look at the concepts here, okay, West Virginia probably is the better quarterback in Greer. Ellinger's been good. Greer's been throwing picks, but man, that guy, he has plenty of NFL upside in a way that Ellinger doesn't. So you have the team with the better quarterback. You're probably the team with the better defense, and they're catching points. So from that perspective alone, you say, all right, let's take a look at the West Virginia side. But you start to dig a little bit. I've not been, I've bet against the Mountaineers on the road in each of their first 2 road games. I bet against them in 2 of their 3 road games. I bet against them at Texas Tech, and they blew them out early and then basically hung on for the win. They needed a pick 6 late, or the Red Raiders probably would have come back and won that game, but instead there was a pick 6, and the Mountaineers ended up winning. But the offense didn't work in the second half. They went to Iowa State, and I bet against them there on the road, and the offense didn't work in the second half of that contest. Shut out after halftime. This team's got 1 touchdown after halftime in 2 road games, and that came on a pick 6. The offense isn't working in the second half of these ball games. Holgerson's getting out-schemed and out-adjusted. That's something that I trust Tom Herman with a whole lot. So I think there's a pretty good case you can make for West Virginia in this ball game, but I'm not going to make it. I don't trust Greer and company to avoid the mistakes that have plagued them. I don't trust them to make the appropriate adjustments after halftime of this ball game.
All right, fair breakdown. I look at this game. West Virginia is the team that has extra time to prepare. Their last game back after that bounce back after Iowa State versus Baylor, they outgained them 568 yards to 287, winning 41-0 at half. Teddy, West Virginia is also 5-2 ATS. Texas just 3-5 against the number. And they've lost all of their Big 12 games this year as a favorite. I think with the extra time to prepare, plus the matchup, Texas just lost Oklahoma State, and their offense looked pretty good. And in the profile of offenses, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, not too dissimilar. And West Virginia has the better quarterback in Will Grier. So I kind of like West Virginia here, Teddy.
Yeah, I was reading some stuff from the local papers this week. Texas is, they have a senior secondary. Multiple seniors, and the cornerbacks were really mad at how they played last week. The safeties were really mad about that this week, and they were talking about senior leadership and stepping up and yada yada. And Greer's throwing picks. That's all I'm going to say. Ellinger's not, and Greer is. So that's my biggest concern for West Virginia. Greer throws picks. You're not going to win that bet.
Tell you, let's move to the Big Ten. We got Rutgers at Wisconsin, 49.5 the total, with Whiskey laying 28 in Camp Randall.
Yeah, easiest game on the board because there's no freaking way I play either one of these teams. I will not play Rutgers. I understand. Hey, they got to cover before the bye against Northwestern. That offense, I cashed a ticket with them against Texas State in the opener, and since then they averaged 10 points a game, barely. I know they haven't averaged 14 since that. I mean, it's just a bad offense. Wisconsin, I know Hornibrook has been upgraded to probable. But you want to have fun? Go through that Badgers injury list player by player by player. There are like dozens of impact players. And when I say dozens, plural, it really feels that way for the Badgers. Both sides of the football decimated with injuries. Can't lay this type of price with a team that has that many injuries to key guys who are all contributors, many of whom were big contributors so far this season, even with Hornibrook back on the field.
Teddy, we'll stay in Big Ten country. We got Notre Dame at Northwestern, 9.5. The Irish laying on the road, 53.5 the total.
Yeah, and it's one of these deals where, the point spread trade with Northwestern. And it's fun to watch gambling stuff become mainstream a little bit, where the major networks are picking up on it. But we've absolutely, everyone, the underdogs are 8-0 in Northwestern games. They're 0-4 as a favorite and 4-0 as an underdog. And, that's built into the number, okay? That's not anything that the betting markets are sleeping on whatsoever. But real interesting. They lost Jeremy Larkin, who was forced to retire. And I'm not a running back guy, and I keep talking about all these running backs that I like. But, they lost Larkin. I'm like, oh, boy, this team's in big trouble, And what's happened is the Frosh has come in and been an absolute monster for Northwestern. Back-to-back 100-yard games for, what's the kid's name? Give me one second. Isaiah Bowser, the Frosh. Back-to-back 100-yard games. And lo and behold, if Northwestern's going to win, Clayton Thorson going to cover. Clayton Thorson's not going to light up Notre Dame's defense. All right, Thorson can make a handful of plays. It's not a Northwestern team that's loaded with playmakers on the outside. They have to ground and pound. That's their only shorten the game, keep Ian Book off the field, and run the football with their young tailback. And obviously, in theory, they're supposed to be capable of doing that. But Isaiah Bowser is going to have a big game for the underdog trend to continue for Northwestern. Look, Notre Dame's a real deal, but now all of a sudden here we are in November, and it's the undefeated team laying points on the road, and that's not something I'm real excited to do at this time of the year, especially with a program like Notre Dame that hasn't been in these, ultra intense late season must win type of games in recent years. The Irish, it's been a while since they were playing for BCS Bowl. What was it, 2012 or 2011? Back when they lost to Alabama. I remember that. It was pretty ugly. But it's been, they haven't been in these type of pressure spots. And look, we all love Ian Book, and Ian Book's thrown for 400 each of the last, 3 games. And the Irish offense is scoring more than 40 points a game with Book at QB, and they're coming off, I'll call it a push. I grade it as a push, where the line bounced between like 21.5 and 23 against Navy last week. Navy, who's 1-7 ATS, by the way. And they got a push. They won by 22 in a game that they controlled. Notre Dame's a better team. They're a lot better, but this isn't the type of time of year where I'm all that interested in. Oh, we're number 3 in the country, and we're number 3 in the BCS standings, and we're laying 9.5 on the highway, and it's just against a team that all they do is cover as dogs. I'm not going to do it with the Irish, regardless if the matchups say I'm going to.
We got the Gophers in the Illini, Minnesota at Illinois. Looks like the Gophers laying 9.5 on the road, 64 the total, Teddy.
Yeah, again, I talk about I'm not going to play Rutgers. I'm not going to play Illinois. When you're talking about the very worst teams in college football, yeah, they'll have a good week. Once in a while, you'll lose a bet. They'll cash a winning ticket. But, you say, how many point spreads is Illinois going to cover in their last 4 games? Minnesota at Nebraska, Iowa at Northwestern. Lovie Smith would be thrilled to go 2-2 ATS in those games. You're not making profits with these type of teams. Things have gone from bad to worse for the Illini. They can run the football. They run the football extraordinarily well. But when you're giving up, they give up 431 on the ground last week, 357 the week before that, 227 the week before that. They give up 387 to Penn State, et cetera, et cetera. We know what Minnesota's game plan is going to be. It's going to be hand the football off. If that's enough to cover this number, well, it might be. But on the other hand, are the Gophers the type of team that you're excited about laying, 9.5 on the road with? I'm not. Minnesota is pedestrian offensively as it gets. Nearly blew a big lead against Indiana last week. Got a late score to win by 7. And, they'll be happy to win by 7 here. Row the boat? No, not this week. Sorry, Fleck. Not this year. Minnesota's still a year or 2 away from making any kind of noise in the Big Ten and being a team I would even consider to lay 9.5 with on the highway.
Teddy, we got some action on a Saturday. Doesn't happen a lot this time of year. We got, with the MAC always playing on Tuesday, Wednesday type games, which I'm a big fan of. But either way, we got a battle of directional Michigan schools. Central Michigan at Eastern Michigan, 46.5 the total, with Eastern laying 13.5 at home.
Yeah, and this one I'm interested in, actually. I definitely look at the Central Michigan side, plus the points in this ballgame. Divisional rivalry, look, Eastern Michigan's in Ypsilanti, Central Michigan's in Mount Pleasant. It's about a 2-hour drive, maybe 2.5. But it's all the kids these are all kids that play together in high school. It's the same recruiting base in Michigan, the kids that are good enough to play college ball but aren't good enough to get scholarships from the Big Ten squad. So these are legitimate rivalry games. Every time Eastern and Western and Central plays, you want to be on dogs. And the point spreads in these games tend to be short. And here we're looking at 13.5. I understand how Eastern's been pretty good. And the last 2 weeks, finally, Eastern Michigan stopped playing games decided by a field goal. They've been back-to-back competitive contests, or non-competitive, one a win and one a loss for Eastern. They got beaten up pretty good by Army last week. Central got beaten up pretty good. No, I'm backwards. Yeah, Central got beaten up by Akron. Eastern got beaten up by Army, but Akron was good enough to beat Northwestern, right? Although they are a good defensive squad. Bottom line, this is a rivalry series. Eastern Michigan, not the type of team that finds it easy to win by margin, and they beat them. They beat Eastern last year by 12. Last trip down to Ypsilanti, they lost by 5. I don't see this as a two touchdown win for Eastern Michigan. Although I'm betting on the chips right now. Again, it's a bad football team. I don't like to bet on bad football teams, but it's not a hopeless team. It was supposed to be a rebuilding year. I do expect them to get better eventually. Might be a year or two away. Bottom line, Central or pass for this better. I don't think that Eastern can lay this number.
Teddy covers 43, 26, and 1 all football, NFL, and college football on the year. 62%, 64% since the beginning of August on his big tickets. And you can use coupon code TEDDY100 at checkout for $100 off his 30-day all access, which also includes all sports. So you're getting his NBA, which is hitting at a 71% clip so far this year. Teddy, last game up, 3-6-1, 3-6-2. Battle of the military academies here. Air Force at Army. Looks like 43 the total, with Army laying 7.
Yeah, and Air Force can capture the Commander-in-Chief's trophy with a win here. They blew out Navy earlier in the season. I was on the wrong side of that game, and it was a one-sided affair. The Air Force dominated. They've been a better team. Air Force got off to such a rough start this season. They've been a much better team since. And of course, they had the win over Navy. They hung tough against San Diego State, covered the number there. They beat UNLV and hung 41 on the Rebels. And then last week against Boise, and you cashed a ticket if you were able to shop around there. They hung 38 on the Broncos. Although there is one fatal weakness for this Air Force defense: they can't stop the pass. Oops, that doesn't matter against Army. So that certainly works in their favor. And, of course, they've gone back to Isaiah Sanders at quarterback. Back-to-back 200-yard passing games for Sanders and the Falcons. Hey, Army's really good. They're not a team I'm in any rush to step in front of. But if I'm playing this game, I would look at the Air Force side in a rivalry game that is very meaningful, and a team that's playing better now than their full season numbers would indicate, and a team whose weakness their opponent can't exploit. Air Force or pass for this better.
Guys, if you like Teddy Covers analysis, we're going to have him back on the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast starting tomorrow. Him and Rob Vino will be the two guests on the NFL slate, so make sure to tune in for that. But we'll be right back with our next guest on the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast.